Hi, I'm Doug from Dynamic Computing, and welcome to episode 135 of 10 Minute Amiga Retro Cast. And guess what? I think it might actually be about 10 minutes today. What I want to talk about is a cool little piece of hardware from our good friends at AmigaKit. Now, I placed an order for some cool stuff from AmigaKit, some power cables for my A3000 and A4000, and Matthew was kind enough to toss in a little item to review. And that item is this little honey right here. And what this is, this plugs in over the CIA chip, the even CIA chip on an Amiga 500, 1000, or 2000, and it allows you to swap the boot up floppy drive from DF0 and DF1 and to swap them vice versa. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, there's actually a lot of good reasons for that. Let's say you've got a Gotek drive, and you've got an internal Gotek drive on your Amiga 500 and an external 3.5-inch floppy. Well, there are times you might actually want to boot from that floppy. Now, if we're using Amiga OS, I think it's 2.0 and above, you can do the two mouse button salute and get into the early startup screen, and from there you can choose to boot from DF0 or DF1. That's really cool. I use it all the time. But with Workbench 1.2 and 1.3, we don't have that cool feature that we can choose which device to boot from. That's where things like this come in really handy. Let's take a look at what it has. Not much, really. What we have is we have a socket up here that we put the even CIA chip in. Then this little beauty plugs right into it. We have a little speaker, so it's going to announce when we switch between DF0 and DF1. And we have a couple of little logic chips in there. This should be really easy to set up. Let's take a look at what I'm going to hook it up into. Now, this is my Amiga 500 that I did a show on last year. There's a link to the show, boom, right there. This is the one I picked up from a gentleman whose father passed away, and I told him I would take good care of it, and I have been taking good care of it. Now, with this little beauty right here, I boot this in all kinds of ways. Sometimes I use my ACA 500 Plus, and that way I can boot from Workbench 1.3 or 3.21, whatever I want to do. It adds a bunch of memory, fast hard drive interface. Sometimes I boot from my A570. I've done a show on that. That adds CD, TV compatibility right to this little beauty right here. But this week I'm booting from a new device. This is a Data Flyer 500, which I will also be doing a show on, the little quirks that I found with this little guy. But for now, this works as a really, really slow hard drive. Now, what are we going to use? Well, we have a real floppy in here. This one, the floppy drive works absolutely beautifully. I've never had any issues with it after I cleaned it. But what I'm using as the external device is this beautiful little device that you guys have seen a bunch of times on my show. This is actually an external floppy interface that works just exactly like a Gotek, uses the same software and everything, and has this little screen here so I can see what I'm selecting. It's a great little item here. But this shows up as DF1 on my Amiga 500 when I'm using Workbench 1.3. And there are times that I want to boot to the games and the programs that are stored on here, and I literally can't do it. It just lets me boot from DF0. So let's see what we can do to solve that problem. We'll set you right here, and let's get inside the Amiga 500, see what we need to do. Now, I already have some expansions in this little beauty here. Put this to the side. I've got my Ramses 2 megabyte chip RAM device. You'll see a link to my video, boom, right there. And that adds 2 megs of chip RAM to this. Now, I could still put something in the belly slot, memory expansion, but it would only see the real-time clock. And you see it's got an interface to little Gary chip here. But that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the even CIA chip, which is right here, right beside the floppy. All right. Now, the tools I use to extract this kind of chip are these little beauties right here. Now, I first really caught on to these watching Adrian's Digital Basement. That's a great channel. These are available on Amazon pretty cheaply, and they can handle removing a lot of different sized chips. We just put it right over there, give it a little squeeze, pops right out. All right, now we're going to flip this over. Now we want to match up our notches, of course. And a notch here, and a notch there. Here a notch, there a notch, everywhere a notch. Nice and tight. Beautiful. Now, of course, you want to also match up the notches, which are on this side. Here's the speaker over here. There's the notch right there. You want to match that up with a notch on the even CIA chip. So we'll just pop this little dude in here. Make sure she doesn't go into the wrong pins. And give her a little determined push. And I think she's in pretty darn tight. Now, in theory, that's all we have to do, because the Amiga is so darn awesome, it will just work with new hardware devices without having to put on 36 drivers like we used to have to do with Windows 1.3 and beyond. So now what we're going to do is we're going to plug in our little GoTechie external device right into the floppy port. Okay, now when we boot her up, this should be DF0, that should be DF1. Let's just prove the theory here, and we're going to switch over to camera view. And now we've booted up to Workbench 1.3. Let's take a look at what we have here. So we're going to open up a command prompt, a command line interface. We're going to do the info command, and we're going to see DF0, no disk present, DF1, sysinfo, which is absolutely true because I have sysinfo loaded up on the external GoTechie device. Now I'm going to put in a floppy disk, ka-chunk, and in a moment we should see it register on Workbench, copy of sysinfo. Yeah, perfect, that's fine. Now when we do info, look at this, DF0, copy of sysinfo, exactly what's in my actual real floppy disk. DF1, sysinfo, that's what's in my actual external floppy disk interface. Now, how do we switch these? DF0 becomes DF1 and vice versa. Well, you do Amiga-Amiga-Ctrl and hold it down for about, I think it's 6 seconds. 4, 5, 6. Now, if you were astute, after 6 seconds, you heard a little chirp chirp coming from the little onboard speaker on this little device. Now we're rebooting, and in theory, it should actually boot up straight to sysinfo on the floppy. Look at that beautiful white screen. Isn't that attractive? I bet you're all thrilled to pieces to see a white screen just sitting there. Look at this, sysinfo. Yes, floppy booting is incredibly fast. There we go. It has now booted, and it is also guru'd. And I have noticed that my sysinfo floppy does do this every now and again. It does do that. But you know, what's an Amiga video without a good guru? Let's go ahead and switch the floppy, and we're going to boot to something else. And what have we booted up? We've booted up River Raid Reloaded, which is one of the most awesome games that works on any OCS, ECS, or AGA Amiga. It's just literally a reboot of River Raid, and it's a fantastic game, and I recommend it to everyone, and it's free. I'll put the link to it in the description. There was just an update for it the other day, just a very, very minor update. I don't even know what they did to it. Wow. Not bad, huh? Booting from an external Gotek DF1 just by holding the mouse button down, or the control Amiga down for 6 seconds. I'm going to run out of gas. Now I'm going to reboot again. I'm going to hold down the control key, Amiga-Amiga-Ctrl for 6 seconds. Listen for the chirp. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it chirped. Now, when we boot up, we should be back to DF0 being the internal floppy and DF1 being the external. Let's take a look. Do our info command. And yep, DF0, nothing in there. DF1 is back to River Raid Reloaded. It swapped just perfectly. Absolutely doing what it's supposed to do. Now here we've rebooted again, and I've swapped the drives. And let's put River Raid Reloaded back in here. And let's put our copy of sysinfo. Yep, that's in there. Go back to info. DF0. River Raid Reloaded. That's on the external Gotek device. But I don't see my floppy as DF1. That's interesting. And doing 3 seconds of research on the AmigaKit website explains what's happened here. What it does is when you swap the drive, the external drive, to DF0, it disables the internal floppy drive. It just vanishes. So this is accurate. We've got DF0 being our external Gotek, and then the internal drive just disappears. To bring it back and put things back to normal, we do another 6-second reboot. Then the DH0 would be the floppy again, and DF1 would be the Gotek. Okay, that's acceptable. So what do I think about this little device? Well, to be honest, I have not plugged it in until the very moment I plugged it in on this show. This is a totally unrehearsed one. I was under the initial impression that it swapped DF0 and DF1, but now I understand when you swap it, it makes DF1 DF0 and disables the internal drive. That's fine. That's the way it works, so that's the way it works. It'll work fine for me, and it does exactly what it's advertised to do. I can now boot on my Workbench 1.3 machine from my external Gotek type device with no problem at all. So all in all, I'm happy with it. The thing works just great.
Please enjoy this game of Scramble converted by JOTB666. Thanks to my wonderful patrons who help keep this show going. See their wonderful names scrolling up the screen. If you want to help the show, stop by patreon.com/10mark. And you can make this prestigious list for as little as $2 per month. Thanks everybody.
So thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe. I'm continually trying to grow the channel. We're up to 6,100 subscribers now. Only almost 1 million away from 1 million subscribers. So I'm making progress. Please follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm on all the social networks. Links are in the description. Comment below. Let me know what you used for your DF0 to DF1 switching things. There were half a dozen ways to do it available now, and there's dozens and dozens of ways that have been made to do it in the past. Let me know how you did it on yours. But until next time.
This is the Amiga 500 signing out. When do I get paid for this?
Huh?